I think we have some folks in the room. This meeting is being recorded, and this is the September 20th, 2021 meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. And so for tonight, we'll have just one or two announcements. Not really old business, but we'll be giving you an update and some clarification on how you can participate in one of the major zoning initiatives that's going on called Zone Norwalk, which is citywide. And time permitting, we'll talk a little bit about a formal group that is starting up Fairfield County wise to continue to compel the state to do highway barriers and noise and pollution attenuation for abutting residential neighborhoods. And there'll be a separate email on that, but ENNA is seeking residents to volunteer to help us because we're a little stretched thin right now. For announcements this month, in addition to all the meetings that you may be following on the city website, a very important hearing, as you know from our emails, is coming up a week from tonight. September 27th at 6 p.m. is the East Avenue Village TOD zone public hearing, which is a public hearing of both of the major land use commissions, our planning commission and our zoning commission. This hearing is to get your feedback, comments, suggestions, concerns regarding the zoning changes that cover East Avenue all the way from I-95 to the Mill Pond, and also contains the final recommendations for the bonus points for amenities that would grant greater height of buildings along the corridor and greater density of residential development. And we'll show you the most current version of that map as well. And we'll be spending some time going through the documents this evening and advising you on how you can prepare for that. And then the Zone Norwalk Plan-A-Palooza that I just mentioned is ongoing. That started Friday night and continues through the 23rd, which is Thursday. Although it's a year-long project, just so you know. Okay, so we're going to be doing a quick online walkthrough of the documents that actually create what's called the East Avenue Village Transit Zone designation. And it's a mouthful, but as most of you will recall, this is related to the actual implementation of what was approved as the East Norwalk Transit Oriented District. Just quickly to recap, this is the from the link from the city's website going through the planning and zoning department under applications pending. And when you click on that, it brings you to this screen. And then one of the things that you'll see here is the East Norwalk Village TOD zone. So you just scroll down on that. And I think it's near the bottom here. Whoops, here we go. So what I wanted to show you is in terms of being able to look at these documents, read them, and then to be prepared for those of you who are going to either speak at next Monday's public hearing or present some written comments and public comments into Steve Kleppen to be shared with the planning and zoning commissioners. It is a joint public hearing, by the way, so the full commissions will be listening to you. And so one of the things that's important to understand is that the city is required to actually create a text amendment that creates this particular zone. And so if you go to the one that's marked revised, which is the latest one. So if you go to this latest one, you'll actually see a document that is the legal document that allows the creation of the zone, which is the city's allowed to create under the state statutes. And so the state statutes speak to village zones. And what the city is doing is adding a village zone called East Norwalk. It's really no more complicated than that. The only thing that may be confusing is that some years back, the city had already added a village district that's called the East Avenue Village District, which is the area that's around the Norwalk Green, essentially. But what we're talking about is East Norwalk Village TOD, which relates to the train station and thus East Avenue. Okay, so as you go through this, it is 17 pages long, but it's fairly easy reading, and it is grouped into logical sequence. Always starts with the purpose and intent of creating a zone or modifying a zone. And as you're reading through the document, you'll want to pay particular attention to the things that are in the baseline village zone that are either crossed out or changed and added in red. So the document itself is a baseline document that has changes to it that are relative just to the East Norwalk POD zone. Okay. You'll see that throughout the document, and it starts, pretty much right away. Those are the things you really want to pay attention to, because you want to understand what city staff is recommending to the commissioners that would be different than what would be in a typical village zone, or what might be different than the existing other village zones within the city, which is East Avenue Village Zone, Golden Hill Village Zone, Rowayton Village Zone, and there's one more, which I can show you later. The next section has to do with actually setting the standards, and for each of the parcels. And one of the things that they're suggesting is that the city be able to hire a village district consultant who can be an architect, landscape architect, or certified planner, that would be able to do a review of construction, substantial reconstruction and rehabilitation of properties that are in view of the public roadways. This is one of the things that's important to us, because the residents are concerned with just how much physical change can happen on East Avenue. And because it would be a third party that would be looking at whatever plans come in for development, it at least has to pass some litmus test of a professional to say whether or not this would actually qualify. It goes into some of the actual detail of new construction, building design, scale, compatibility, and then goes into what people should become familiar with as much as you can, which is a list of the uses, a list of the uses that are allowed within the district standard. When you read these, you might consider two things for your comments and suggestions and concerns. One might be that you look at this list and something jumps out and you think, I probably would rather not have that within these parcels in this area. Another one might pop out that says, what took us so long? We really, really need this here. And it would be beneficial to the community, and we think it would be successful. And then yet another option might be that you go through the list and you come up with one or two or many more options for what you'd like to see be possible in this zone that aren't actually on this list now. And so if you think of something, especially if you participated in any of the meetings for brainstorming and you don't see it on here, you might want to bring that up at the public hearing. The commissioners would be anxious to hear all three of those scenarios. The next thing in this document to understand is what the city would allow in terms of special permit uses and structures. And I think probably everybody on here is familiar with our concern with special permits being granted. They typically are for something, of course, that otherwise wouldn't be allowed and have to meet a stricter standard that actually measures them against quality of life and the impact on the community. Again, I think it's worthwhile to take a look at this list and highlight anything you may be concerned with that you think shouldn't be there. Highlight something that you think should be in there. And if there's something in there that you particularly are happy to see coming in that we don't already have, I think that would be worthwhile comment as well. Okay, you also have some definitions of particular uses like boutique manufacturing and farmers markets and things like that. You can read all the descriptions there. And then anything that's in red, even in the smaller paragraphs, I would ask you to pay particular attention to in terms of your review, because it's something that wouldn't have existed within the original document and something that wouldn't have existed within the village guidelines. And to especially read what it is that they're allowing or looking to compel someone to do. And this would be a good example of it right here, where they're actually defining how much of a particular parcel that intersects on any one of the corners, how much of a street activating use has to be comprised on that parcel. Okay, and then they define street activating uses. Just losing my signal again here. Can you still hear me? And they define here the street activating uses could be one or more of the following, and you'd want to review that list as well. Another thing that you want to be careful of when you're reading these documents is that there are certain segments in this document that seem to give great leeway to the planning and zoning commissioners and other land use approval bodies, where it appears to be subjective in terms of saying it may not meet specifically the letter of the statute for this village district, but it appears to meet the spirit of what was intended. The reason why we think people should be cautious with that is because whenever you're analyzing those things, it does tend to be very subjective. And it would be easy for, a land use body like planning and zoning to be compelled to approve something that the public may not actually want. And it could be something that actually gets approved in a manner that wouldn't require it to come before the public as a public hearing. Okay, so the most important thing that you'll want to look at in this document actually starts on page 9. And it starts to define what you guys have heard about now for months called bonus amenities. And bonus amenities are what they were intended to be, things that could be included in new development on East Avenue that would be considered public amenities, meaning in the best interest of the public, that would be for public use, or that would make things more walkable and make it a better quality of life for the public. As this project was being designed, Steve Kleppen, the planning and zoning director, and the consultants decided to kind of do a beta test on what it might be like if they came up with a list of bonus amenities and assigned a point system to it, so that if a developer wanted to be able to build a building that is higher or contains more apartment units than what the baseline statute would allow, then that developer could pick and choose from this a la carte menu of bonus amenities. And by mixing and matching and coming up with a total number of points, they could then get approval to build higher and to have more residential units within their building. Okay. A little confusing, and I'll explain that more if there's questions to it. But what you'll see starting from that page now starts to define what the public amenities are. And they actually begin to give the examples here of the amenity itself, okay, and how they're defining it. An actual picture of something that they think would be representative of what the zoning commissions could consider, and the total points that would be available for that particular amenity. As I understand it now from the communication from Steve Kleppen to the zoning and planning commissioners, that this chart and these points are still in draft form. And this is where we possibly could have the most influence in terms of either A, buying into the point system at all, and B, taking a look to see what's included in this list as possible amenities, and C, reviewing the point system where it may allow a very minimal amount to be done that's very kind of temporary, low cost for the developer to put in and maintain, but where the developer receives the financial benefits of height and residential density in perpetuity. And you really can't go back once these things are awarded. So it's important to understand what's being proposed here. Things like pedestrian seating, shaded public seating, floor junction boxes for outdoor events, powered seating so people can plug in their devices, free Wi-Fi, water fillers, public art, which I understand has to be vetted through the Arts Commission, etc. And then there are amenities that are defined as sustainable, which have to do with development of the site itself in terms of environmentally sound and energy conservation, green walls, rain gardens, community gardens. I think you've all seen the list before. And what you'll see here, any of the ones in red have either been added or changed. And the points that are over there as well, you'll see how they correlate. Okay. So assuming the Planning and Zoning Commission has bought into the point system, and so far at every review that Mr. Kleppen has done in the past 6 months or so, they have, then what ends up happening is then you take a look at how these points can get racked up depending on what the developer wants to put in. And so I'll give you an example here. If 15 points are achieved, and at least 10 points of those are considered sustainable, and you can go back to the list to see what sustainable amenity is, then at that level of achievement, the building height can be increased from 2.5 stories to 3.5 stories. And it goes from 35 feet to 45 feet. The residential density goes from 1 dwelling for every 1,650 square feet of a lot area to 1 dwelling for every 1,250 square feet. That's with just 15 points. So the exercise here for folks is you're considering your feedback would be to go back and take a look at what combination of 15 points, including 10 sustainable, might get them to this level. And then ask yourself, is that enough of a public amenity to warrant support for the increased height and density? You might say that they should be able to get it at the lowest possible points. But this is really where you need to do the analysis. There's only a 2-step calculation here that so far has been presented, and I don't think it's going to change. So the next step up is just 20 points. So there's only a 5-point gap here. In this 20 points, provided that 13 of them are considered sustainable, they go from the 2.5 stories to the 3.5, still the 10 feet extra height as well. But the residential density they can have within that footprint increases from 1 dwelling for every 1,650 square feet to 1 dwelling unit per every 825, 1,650 and 825. So essentially double for 20 points with 13 of them sustainable. When you look at the list of sustainable, and I should actually go back to that for a second, and you've been attending our meetings and our public comments, ENNA board and most of our residents have taken the position that the things that they've defined as sustainable, many of these things should be the price of entry at this point for development within this village district. They benefit, first of all, many of them benefit the actual developer themselves because it's cost savings in terms of the types of building structures they may do. But because in this day and age, some of these things should just be the standard now. Even if it's not like a national standard, it should be Norwalk standard. We've been told by city staff that they don't know if we can impose that, and they had something of a comment come that after they submitted it to the legal department, it still didn't really satisfy it, you know, for us to say that we can't require these. It seemed pretty simple to me that if we're defining a whole new district, that within reason, that something that wouldn't seem to be exclusionary from a discrimination point of view, we should be able to define it almost any way the city wants. I think the example we gave, you know, could be extreme, but why wouldn't there be an instance where you're defining a new district that people are longing for to spur development, but you say that, you know, every other parcel must be have a purple roof, for example, just something completely insane. But the idea would be that if that's how you want to define that village district, then you should be able to define it. And I think we'd be hard pressed for the state to come back and say, you know, you can't define paint colors, but you can define, you know, building exteriors and siding and things like that. So again, we think that a lot of weight is given to the sustainable and environmental aspect of this, which is good. But we also think that there's a number of these things which should be automatic at this point. The price of entry and, you know, the application shouldn't be considered for a development here without it, much less increased development. Okay, hopefully everybody kind of gets that point, and I hope you'll keep it in mind when you review these things. Okay, highlighted in yellow, here's another thing. Anything that's in yellow and highlighted, we would want you to pay attention to. And we didn't highlight these, by the way. These are actually highlighted in the document that the city prepared in the zoning commissioner tab. And this simply reads, should an applicant propose an amenity which is similar to and in keeping with the intent of the regulations, the commission may allow this amenity in addition to the other amenities in this section. Okay, and so that would be considered, I think, something relatively subjective, but also we don't see anywhere where that type of decision would actually require input from the public. And so that would be concerning, concerning to us right there. Okay, those are the calculations. There's some information on what and where and how signage can be, and you should thoroughly review that because sometimes signage is much more, we have much more concerns with signage than zoning does. So that is the 17-page actual document that creates the guidelines that allows them to defines the guidelines and actually allows them to create the district. And before I go on to the next section, I just want to be able to point out and remind people again that this is the EVTZ, the East Avenue Village Transit Oriented District Zone. The parcels that are highlighted here in gray, starting where my cursor is up at the highway on East Avenue and progressing down. Going in, you could see where parcels actually go further in from the block, and then coming down and around and including Mill Pound parcel around to Gregory Boulevard, abutting Masonic Lodge, and then at the triangle at Ludlow and coming back up and then all the way back up to the highway, just so that you get your bearings there. Any questions or hands raised right now, Chumley? Or
there's no hands raised, but there are some comments in the chat.
Okay.
Amenities like the rooftop restaurant that was promised at the I'm sorry, keep calling
Brim
it
and Crown.
Brim and Crown. It never happened. So where is the public space that was promised to the community in the past?
That's a great comment. I'll address that one now, and I'll also address it in terms of this actual document. When you take a look at the things that are required, and a developer comes in and they say, we're going to have these particular items that we think would be public amenities, doesn't necessarily mean that it's, you know, completely accessible to the public, but it does mean that it's an amenity in the community that the public would want. Very often these zoning approvals go through based on those. And then what happens is somewhere down the road, the very first things that get pulled out either as financial hardship or can't meet the qualifications for setbacks, et cetera, are things like what happened with us at 230 East Avenue at the train station, which was originally supposed to be a top floor or rooftop restaurant that, you know, would be, I mean, the public could, you know, obviously use it. And they went back to planning and zoning, to zoning, and zoning approved them moving that to the, I think it's down to the bottom floor at this point, and did not require, when they change something like that, a public amenity, when it does come back before zoning, if it was a special permit to begin with, then the zoning commission also has to decide first if they believe the change that's being requested is a major change or a minor change. If they designated a major change to what they originally approved, then as a special permit, they must hold another public hearing relevant to the change being requested. If they designated a minor change, then the applicant can simply submit and go through approval, and the public has no comment on it in a formal public hearing. Although I want to remind people, residents can always write in to the planning and zoning commissioners in care of Steve Kleppen on any topic. And so he would get comments to them as well. But that's what happened there. And there's nothing to stop similar things from happening in any of the special permits that would come in on that whole East Avenue corridor.
Okay, next up is how is sustainable a benefit to trade for height and density? That doesn't give us residents something of value for more density.
Well, that's an interesting comment, because many people in the community are concerned with our local environment. And when I say local, you know, I don't just mean Norwalk, I mean in particular East Norwalk, and to make sure that we're either doing things to improve the environment here in terms of, you know, air quality and open space and getting trees in, et cetera. But also making sure that new development that comes in is being done in an environmentally sound manner. So there's a school of thought that says whenever you're able to encourage or require sustainable building techniques that are recognized in the industry, that actually benefits the community as a whole, because it's either adding to green space, or it's providing water features where there's water collection and circulation versus water going back into our stormwater system. It could be things that are impacting the building itself in terms of energy efficiency, efficiency with systems that impact our sewer plant, the wastewater treatment center. The requirement to add trees would be seen as beneficial. So I think to answer that question, I think it comes down to personal preference, but to many people, it is so important that they felt it should be a component of the bonus points. And in particular, I think there were one or two environmental advocates in the city that that lobbied for and ultimately were able to get those sustainable features given more weight in those bonus points. And that's how it went from having to meet having the bonus points meet at least 10 and 13 sustainable.
Okay, there's a comment and also a question from Carol. The comment is there's nothing that will benefit the residents, just more traffic congestion, aggravation, and noise. The question is what will happen to existing buildings like St. Thomas, Mike's Deli, etc.
Okay, so in terms of benefiting the community, I think again, it's how you take a look at it. If we have some new development that comes in that provides more affordable housing, that provides additional desired retail and boutique type stores, possibly desired restaurants, services that we may not have in the community now that could be desired, could all be part of this new, spurring of development here to bring into East Norwalk what people want to see. So that would be a benefit. Certainly, there is nothing within the scope of this designation that suggests eminent domain by the city, either the city itself or the redevelopment agency, which operates under the HUD guidelines for development. So when you talk about parcels that might ultimately be developed, you have to keep in mind that a developer actually has to be able to purchase those parcels from a willing seller in order to be able to consider putting something there. Or a current property owner could certainly apply to do any one of these new types of developments that would be allowed and encouraged there. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I can tell you that at least one of our great ENNA members and volunteers, I'm not sure if he's on here or not, Lou Garcia, has done extensive research into looking at these parcels and exactly how parking would work. Because it seems when you're looking first at the size of what this development could be, that in the absence of adequate on-site parking to meet the needs of retail and residential, that these parcels actually can't be developed because the single parcel lots simply aren't big enough to have a footprint that's allowed under the special permits along with the height, because they wouldn't be able to meet the parking requirements. And so that would be a concern for the community, of course, along with the traffic. But to answer the question, some of the benefit would be for folks who are eager to get some new development on East Avenue that meets the needs of the community. The drawback to that is that when you start to get larger scale development, especially with retail and food service and services, you have to have a draw from outside of the community to make those economically viable. And to some extent, part of the vision that's within this from the city is to be able to attract more people into the area, not only to live, but to shop and dine and partake of services.
Okay. Scott Goodwin had a comment, and it is, why not eminent domain? The widening of East Avenue at Fitch would mean the removal of a 100-year-old tree.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm understanding that, because you mean eminent domain to take the property so that that doesn't happen, or are you talking about?
No. I'm. You had mentioned a minute ago, Diane, that you haven't seen signs of eminent domain, and I was just curious. I was talking to one of my neighbors who's worked at St. Thomas there for decades, and she was explaining to me how the tree on the corner of the lot, that's older than Norwalk itself, will be taken down to accommodate the widening of Fitch and essentially this new cityscape that they're planning.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so two things with that. One, there are some, you can say that there are some slivers of where there are some takings that were already identified separate to this, which is related to the widening of East Avenue. And those things have already been addressed in terms of where there are curb cuts, for example. I believe what she may have been talking about is if there was a progression of the widening of Fitch at East Avenue related to the concept that came in under the Norton application, I think.
That
Because
sounds
as far
right.
as I
That's-
know,
yes.
the cut in at the curb that would have had to do with just the widening of East Avenue didn't go in that far. So you could have her reach out to the city, Scott, or to me, and we could certainly find that out.
Okay, thanks. I may be wrong. I'm just, again, this is hearsay. It was a concern that someone else had voiced to me that sounded valid.
Because I think the other concern there too is the cutaway of the cutout on East Avenue at the church, where either funeral processions or weddings or other religious events there would be going on, to lose that actual cutout there at the street. That's something that's directly related to a project of East Avenue widening.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, Scott. Okay, anybody else right now, or can we continue?
Oh, there's just one quick comment. Why
Uh-huh.
can't we request a post office substation for East Norwalk?
I love that because when we lost the one we had at Rite Aid, really that is a quality of life thing to be able to have a service like that right here. And I think that it's one of the things that's been on every single wish list. And it's the type of thing that as these applications come in from developers, as we meet with them, and hopefully we hope to meet with them if it's a major application, and even private property landowners right now and businesses, I think that we would be encouraged to ask every single one of them, are they willing to devote that space and to have that there for us. It was right up there at the top of the list on every wish list and survey that we had within East Norwalk, and we'll continue to lobby for it. I don't think the post office is going away anytime soon. It would certainly be a convenience here for us to have our little substation back again. And maybe so some of us have been communicating very strongly with Rite Aid lately because they've made some major changes over there. And I was just in contact with two of their corporate folks regarding that. And darn, I forgot to bring up the possibility of them having it back in Rite Aid, which would be good. But I will be talking to them again, and maybe I'll just for sure I'll broach it with them. Okay, so this one will just kind of help you to understand. It's a standard chart that the city uses. It's called a schedule of limiting height and bulk of buildings. And this chart exists for every zone within the city. And what Steve Kleppen did was he put together a chart for the planning and zoning commissioners as an easy reference to take a look at the EVTZ zone, which is along the bottom in red, and compare it to just two of the existing village districts, the East Avenue Village District, which is around the Norwalk Green, and the neighborhood business districts, which currently exist in a number of places within the city. The things that are highlighted in red are what's being proposed in the EVTZ zone. And it's important to note a couple of things. One, to understand the heights and the size of plots and what setbacks are, etc. But also, we thought it was important to compare it to other village districts. We had asked Steve Kleppen to send to us this chart, but including the other three village districts in it. And I wrote to him again just before we went live, and to remind him that we hadn't received it. And I think it's important that we do receive it because Rowayton has a village district and a train station, and Golden Hill has a village district designation, and they also are within a half mile of the South Norwalk train station. So to have an honest comparison, I think that this chart should be presented to the planning and zoning commissioners and the public with all of them on there so that we can see exactly how EVTZ is stacking up to what other communities within other neighborhoods within the city have received and accepted. Just a couple of highlights here. You'll see that for height, the East Avenue Village District can only go to 2.5 stories and 35 feet, or a maximum of 3 and 35 feet if it's a hotel. And then same thing in business. But then when you come to EVTZ, we're the zone that's getting the special permit with the bonuses that allow them to go to 3.5 stories and 45 feet by special permit. Okay. And again, special permits require public hearings. I want to make sure that people understand that. They just don't fly under the radar screen. So whether you think you're heard or not at public hearings, at least you have an opportunity to speak. Maybe what we should do even before next week is to try to do a graphic. And Charles, maybe you can help me with this, to highlight from street level, like the average height person in compared to a building that's at 35 feet versus 45 feet, and just see what the perception might be there so that people get an idea.
Sure.
Okay. And then in neighborhood business, which we have now, the minimum size of a plot is 5,000 square feet, but they're saying along East Avenue, there wouldn't be a special permit that's allowed for under 10,000 square feet and 75 width, for example. There's no maximum frontage in the others, and the maximum frontage on East Avenue would be 10 feet. And you can kind of follow this along in terms of things like setbacks and where are we? And then the number of residential areas, and the residential units that can be put in there is significantly higher than in other zones. Okay. And then finally, from that same page we started with all of the links that the commissioners have, is the document that is the actual design guidelines. So the document I just showed you is the regulations that kind of defines the zoning itself and what can happen under different circumstances. Design guidelines actually literally, it's like what it sounds like. It's the actual guidelines that will dictate the design of the corridor. It defines again the peer review process with a village district consultant, what the guidance would be back to the zoning commission. It states that in addition to being able to consult with this village district consultant, the commission can also seek recommendations from any relevant city agency, regional agency, or outside specialist, including but not limited to the following. And so you'll see the Norwalk Historical Commission, the Arts Commission, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. East Norwalk Neighborhood Association asked to be included on this list, and we were declined by Mr. Kleppen as not being a formal either city agency, regional agency, outside specialist to be able to consult. So we are not part of the peer review possible groups that our zoning commission could look to get feedback, suggestions, concerns, etc. Okay, some of the language that has to do with allowing the zoning commission to consider compliance alternatives was taken out of design guidelines. I actually think it was put back in, and I need to double check with Steve Kleppen if that is now in or out. This is the piece that ENNA is concerned with because it's the highest level of subjectivity of what the zoning commission can approve without it ever coming back to the residents, the public itself. And then it goes into materials, design principles, the buildings themselves, how they're structured, signing, lighting, parking, alleyways, curb cuts, etc. Landscaping, of course, as well. And building placement, the orientation of the building. So everything about literally the design and placement, if you're thinking about the structure itself, is in this design guideline. And I would ask, again, if you're interested in this and you're looking to provide your feedback to the city, that you go ahead and read through this. It is a little bit longer document, but it's an easy read. And I would ask you again to particularly pay attention to anything that's crossed out from the original text and anything that you see that's added that's in red. Whoops, and here's a yellow one. Okay, and so, and any of the ones that are highlighted in yellow were ones that were of particular concern. Here's one that says street activating use frontages shall have at least 70% of the ground floor facade in transparent windows and storefronts. I'm not sure why that was highlighted that way, but I know somewhere in here, you're going to stumble upon one that I don't think is taken out, where there could be an opportunity for a developer to include their ground floor activation as actual residential units. So I just want you to think about that for a minute. So if you have a mixed use building with some portion of it street activated retail, service, food, etc., and then possibly a second and maybe third floor, say could be professional offices, or second floor professional offices and then third floor residential, or a combination of the second and third floors as residential. There's a component in here somewhere, I'm not sure where it is, that actually allows them to have activation at the ground floor with additional residential units and considered activated. And then in the appendix, you'll see, you've seen these before in the consultant's presentation of some of the different types of building form and massing of, what could be representative of East Norwalk, and to compare it to other similar, communities in Norwalk. I think there's Westport, Fairfield, there's a bunch of communities in Massachusetts that they highlighted. And so those are some of the structures and storefronts and things that could be in there. There's some examples of landscaping, of street furniture, some other public amenities like solar powered recycling bins, etc. For dog waste, dog, watering stations, bike racks, seating, curbing, etc. I would say, because the public hearing is on September 27th, originally it was actually on August 31st, and we pushed and actually went to the mayor and say that was kind of crazy with no notice. But now September 27th is upon us. ENNA has vocalized to the city that we think a full moratorium on text amendments, such as the creation of this district, should have been put in place while the other major initiative, Zone Norwalk, which is going to look at the regulations throughout defining the city, is ongoing. So it seems now that, again, that this is being pushed through fairly quickly, coming to public hearing. And I'm not sure with this public hearing of the draft, how quickly Steve Pepin can turn it around and do a final, public hearing and have this thing actually accepted. But if our public hearing is next week, then it is possible that this could happen sometime in the next, 8 to 12 weeks, just as a heads up here. And we can check the timeline as well. So I would encourage people to read all of this and review it. It's hard for me to take phone calls to chat with people, although it's one of my favorite things to do with residents. But I'm always accessible via email. And it means that I can answer your emails in the middle of the night as well. So if you want to communicate with me or any other board member with comments or questions or concerns, or you just need help getting through this, just email me. Please, you always have the opportunity, and we encourage you to do it, to also send questions and concerns and comments into Steve Kleppen, the Planning and Zoning Director. He's very responsive. He's another one who will respond, late at night and on weekends, and do his best to get you the information that you're looking for, because, they do want people to be informed, and they do want people to be able to engage in the process and feel confident that they're understanding what they're reading. And if they're not, at these public hearings, especially when the city itself is the applicant, you could feel free to ask questions. So even though it's not a dialogue going back and forth, the commissioners and staff generally are very respectful of the fact that someone has a question. No matter how simple or how complicated, they will make an attempt to answer your question. And in some cases, depending on the two chair people of the Planning and Zoning Commissions, Fran DeMeglio and Lou Schulman, respectively, sometimes they will be a little less formal with these hearings, and they will allow some dialogue back and forth as well. All right, so we'll just take a couple of quick minutes here then. The things I'm going to show you right now are posted on zonenawalk.com. You might want to write that down, because now it's the third website that folks have to go to kind of compile information on what's going on with zoning. This is the initiative called Zone Norwalk, which essentially is the updating of the regulations of the building code and zones throughout the city, not just East Norwalk, everywhere. And so the consultants, TPUDC, held their kickoff Plan-a-Palooza session on Friday night. And so this afternoon they did post the PowerPoint from there. So we encourage folks to log on and go and open that and take a look at it. And I just wanted to be able to point out a couple of slides in here. One, they did a pretty good job of defining zoning. It's kind of a hard thing to define, except when you go to Google it, you'll see a whole bunch of legal definitions of it, but they've put together a pretty good definition, which is it implements the vision of a comprehensive plan. In Norwalk, it's our plan of conservation and development, or called the citywide plan. It literally groups land into different areas and zones, and that's why you see zoning maps. It contains all the rules about what you can do and can't do in each zone. And the zoning itself does not cause anything literally to be built. It just permits and limits what can be built in the zone. And then you can kind of go through the rest of the slides. Are really self-explanatory, although they should be posting the video of this session as well.
Diane, really quickly, they have been posting the videos. They're on YouTube.
Okay, and so then here's kind of like the end goal of this, of how they've defined it with the new building zone regulations that will ultimately come out of this thing after a year-long process. It should reflect the land use policies. It should improve consistency with the master plan, and also the state statutes and court decisions, which many of you may be aware with now in terms of especially housing decisions. It should reflect best practices. It should address some of the provisions which we all know are problematic, either understanding them or the process of how zoning regulations work. It should be logically organized and clearly written. And that's one thing that the prior consultant who they're working with as well really gave some significantly beneficial feedback to Steve Kleppen and the group on how to present zoning regulations so that mere mortals like us look right at it and clearly understand, here's a zone, here's what you can do in it, and kind of visuals about what the process would be for a zoning application, and to use graphics to explain the concepts, which clearly they're going to be able to do, and to be easily maintainable. And so here's one example of, if you guys have ever gone into our zoning regulations, I think you'd really rather have a root canal with no Novocaine than try to read any of those pages and understand it. This you'll want to hone in on their presentation, but basically what it says is that you have a list of land uses that are possible, and then in a grid, it actually has a legend for you of where it would be approved, and I think what some of the conditions might be if it's approved, if it could be approved as of right or special permit. So this is something fairly visual and something easy for people to understand. And then on slide 72, they start to give some representation of different types of housing opportunities, so that you could see visually what things might look like within zones. And then they also give you representative buildings of what they end up looking like. There was one of their slides where they actually had structures that are within Norwalk. I'm not sure if this is one of them or not, but you could take a look at that. And then on slide 74, they go into each of the components of zoning and give you the definition. They illustrate what it is and what's permitted in particular districts. In this case, they gave you an example of civic space, so open space. And this is very visual and easy for people to understand, like parks, greens, squares, plazas, community gardens. So hopefully our regulations end up looking something close to that. The goal is to have regulations that work for Norwalk. I'm not going to make any comment on that. Here are the posters you've seen that we've been putting out in our emails and that are on the website. Goes through the some of the continuing sessions that they're having. The sessions that they had during the Planapalooza today, I don't know if anybody was at it, but today they focused on streets and connectivity. The session right before we started tonight was on character and development regarding housing and development. And then tomorrow at 6 p.m. they have their sustainability and green infrastructure. But during each of these days, they also have what they call their virtual open studio. So it's literally live and you can go in via Zoom and log in and you can watch them working and you can ask questions and you could submit comments. And for any of the charrettes and these workshops, you can also register and you can still participate online. And then they did provide the calendar now in terms of the timeline. And you'll see that we were at the charrette and the workshop public sessions. And then they go into drafting the regulations. They'll be made public for comment in the spring. And the goal is to have final regulations that are actually ready for adoption in the summer of next summer. And then finally, what they have in here is access to register for a virtual mapping workshop exercise that you can take advantage of. Those of you who participated in the master planning and also participated in the East Avenue TOD study will recognize this as an exercise where you highlight on a map places of opportunity that you think need work, character that needs improvement, character that you love in areas on the map, and something that you something that we should see. Or I guess to provide them with an example of something that they should see, that they should consider. So kind of similar. Actually, it's similar to what we've done, but not exactly identical. And I'll just say, bear in mind, this regulations is the overview of the whole city, and yet very quickly the East Avenue transit zone is going to be put forth for approval. So I guess the premise is that whatever is in there, city staff and the zoning and planning commissioners feel will be either substantially similar to what could end up in the zoning regulation rewrite, or it will actually become the basis for the city regulation rewrite as it pertains to East Norwalk. Hey, Scott.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I'm multitasking with dinner. So, so I went to the two charrettes today, and there's definitely room for representation from folks in this group right now. That Diane, I know I saw you there Friday night at the one online Friday, but you know, some of the things today, one of them only had 16 people in it, and it seemed like they were primarily from Silvermine and Rowayton. You know, in the concerns about you know, quality of life, those kind of things. So just putting it out there. There's one on Green something or other tomorrow night at 6, and then
Sustainability, yeah.
yeah, and then there's one on Thursday night. But you know, one thing that I've found, while generally I'm skeptical about the 5th or 6th round of consultants brought in the last year or so, these folks, one, they seem very professional, and they are actively taking notes. And so I believe that will make its way into their considerations. The thing that you have on screen right now, this mapping workshop, you know, they have flagged that as, if there's something you love, put a pin on the map. If there's something you hate, put a pin on the map. And so there are opportunities for us to influence here as well as in their forums. That when I asked about the forums the other day, or how we could post either longer form or photos of things that we consider to be, you know, things that we don't want. Jessica from TPUDC pointed out the forum, and then noticed that they literally had 0 posts from anyone anywhere throughout the forum as of the other day. So we're you know, the danger of the virtual world we're in means that, you know, unless you're a squeaky wheel using these online tools that they have, nobody, you know, nobody's going to know. So we'll just be complaining to each other. So just encouraging people to get on there and use these tools.
Thank you. Sure. And I think it may be beneficial too to see if there's another opportunity to have the TPUDC folks back for an ENNA meeting again, and, you know, see if they could fit that in their timeline, so that maybe we can be more engaged with them on our timeline and what's best for our residents as well.
That would be great. And, you know, you just made me think, one of the questions that someone asked this morning maybe was whether the meetings with the different neighborhood representation groups from around town, whether those had been recorded and were being posted online, like the one from Friday night. And the response was, I need to check with Steve Kleppen about that. While we may have recorded, those were not considered public sessions because they were you know, I think it was because it was invite only. The thought was they don't need to treat them with the same level of transparency. Yeah,
and that's a good point too. And I think we'll do a recap, and we have to be careful of how we do that, because we did have advisory board member Roberta DiBasegli at the stakeholder group for ENNA. But I know that it was originally billed as a forum where they could speak freely without, and you know, and I think it was, you know, basically confidential, where like the verbatim comments weren't going to be attributed to anyone. It was going to be compiled. And if Roberta is that Roberta there? Oh
yes, hi.
Oh, hi Roberta, thanks. Yep.
I just moved from my computer.
You know what? I'm just brain fog. I just completely forgot about that until Scott mentioned the stakeholder initial interview sessions. Yes. Are you able to give us a quick update, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can give you a quick update. I think absolutely the meeting that I attended that had stakeholders, we basically just were singing the same old songs.
Hmm.
I mean, sorry, I mean, and really we talked about quality of life, we talked about walkability, we talked about enforcement, we talked about illegal apartments. I mean, there were, I have to apologize because I did write a review and I posted it to Basecamp and it didn't go through for some reason, but I'll rewrite it again. The big question I had was, what after so many East Norwalk residents attended these TOD meetings and really put so much energy and so much effort into it, and really basically came out of it bereft.
Right.
What would they have us tell our membership to encourage them to attend these? Like, how is this going to be different? And frankly, I didn't get an answer. I got more information about how, we understand about meeting fatigue. But, I have to be frank. I just don't really see how this is going to be any different from any other thing that we've given so much energy and time to. So, I mean, maybe I'll show up at one, maybe I won't, but I basically said everything that we talk about at our meetings.
Thanks, Roberta. I think, and I tend to agree because we've done enough of these where we feel that we're not being heard. And I know, at least in the couple go-arounds with this stuff now with consultants, that people do email into us and contact me directly to say, why should we bother? And I think the answer that they probably should have given is the fact that if they show that they're listening to people and addressing what people want and don't want, then you're less likely to have meeting and participation fatigue when people are being acknowledged and listened to.
Correct.
And being acted upon. Because that almost builds a momentum to say, somebody's listening to me, I'm going to be at the next, fill in the blank workshop. The meeting fatigue really sets in when you've expended your time and you gave your input and either A, you weren't heard, or B, you were heard and ignored. And that probably would have been an important message for the TPUD people to be able to distinguish. And I guess the proof will be in the pudding as they wrap up on Thursday and they start to do this. This Thursday is kind of like a draft, regurgitation, for less of a better word, of what they heard so far. And so Thursday night session may be, I think it's at night, may be the one that actually that we can test exactly how that's going, and not to test it to say it's not working and we drop out, but to test it and say it is working. So now we got to get people to say, we got to get the word out to say, hey, these guys are the ones it's working, or that it's not working and we still have time to course correct with them. At least together one effort. I'm willing to do that. So thanks, Roberta.
Yep.
So the other thing too that I want to be able to show you here is just quickly, if people are interested, there's a new group that's forming. We've had a concern in Norwalk for quite some time in terms of sound barriers along the highway, because there are stretches in Norwalk that don't have any when, basically every other community does. From time to time, we kind of get together in Norwalk, some of us, mostly ENNA, and we go to our state legislators and we go to the DOT and we say we've got to get funding to be able to protect our residents from noise pollution and fine particulate air pollution that's created by I-95. Of course, we know that we draw out the haters in the community who will say, well, you moved next to a highway and that's kind of what you get. But that's not what our philosophy is. And for some of us, and I'm included, I'll say I'm personally affected. I can guarantee you when we bought our home 35 years ago, there was not the massive amount of traffic and trucks and destruction to the roads with constant, construction and everything that there is today. But there's no doubt, and it's well documented, the mental and physical effects of noise and air pollution. And so we have to continue to make a push for this. So there is a group that's actually organizing, starting out of the Greenwich and Byram and Coscob and Riverside area, because they're about to have a massive I-95 reconstruction and repaving project, just like we have one starting in a couple of months, that have started a group called Stop 95 Noise, and are starting to mobilize. And we've been in contact with them because we think there's strength in numbers in terms of influencing the state legislature and the DOT to reconsider two things. One, how they can fund sound barriers outside of what the federal funding criteria is, but also there's been leap years of improvements in technology in roadway materials and design that attenuate noise. And other countries have been using some of these things for years. And it's not even a factor here due to the elements and weather, because as I understand it, I believe either Maine or New Hampshire or both actually have embraced some of this new technology. So there are things that we can do from, to improve quality of life relative to the highway, because it seems like commuting on the highway hasn't gone away despite mass transit and commuters and share riding and, remote working, etc. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Can't share a whole lot more at this point, but one of the things that we do want to do is have some ENNA representation. And as you know, the board is kind of stretched thin, and everyone is volunteers, and all of the residents here, participate as you can, and you have other commitments. But if there's anyone in the group, yourself or anyone that you know within our community, either near the highway or is concerned about this issue as a whole, please have them reach out to us at info@eastnorwalk.org via email and let us know. Because if we can find a couple of volunteers from the community to represent East Norwalk with this group, we would really, really love to be able to have that happen. So our meetings are recorded, as you know, so we'll post this, and I'll get back to folks with what comments were and continue to get you some information. We'll send that information out via email, and for relative documents and videos, we'll post them on our website. And want to thank everyone, and we'll see you next month.